Do you think Islam is at war with the West?
I think Islam hates us. There's something there there's a tremendous hatred there. There's a tremendous hatred. We have to get to the bottom of it. There is an unbelievable hatred of us.
Friends, I'm visiting our daughter here in Los Angeles, and I have an interview with Mateen Elass on Islam. They're going to show you in a few seconds here. But before that, I wanted to also share with you a couple of clips of a presentation that this British journalist, Melanie Phillips, did, exposing the West to the extreme danger of radical Islam. And I think you will enjoy it, as I did.
The war against Israel is an Islamic holy war against first Israel and then the West. It cannot see the Islamic threat against itself in the West. It cannot see the steady advance of Islamization of Western nations through both the democratic process and threats and intimidation. It tells itself instead that Islamic extremism is nothing to do with Islam, that opposition to mass immigration is racist. Holding Muslims accountable for the misdeeds of a large minority in that community is Islamophobia. It cannot see that what's happening on the streets and the campuses is not just demonstrations against Israel, but jubilant and ecstatic demonstrations of control and power over the West on their way to conquer it for Islam. In London and in Brussels, in New York and in Toronto, Muslims are praying in large numbers in the streets. They have plenty of mosques. They're praying in the streets to show that they are taking control of that country. And they believe they are taking control. And what does the West say in response to this? It's freedom of expression. Everything that Israel does is in accordance with international law, that the Jews are the indigenous people of the land, the whole land, that the Arabs are the colonialists, that there is no such thing as the Palestinians, that the Palestinian cause was invented only to steal the Jews' identity and history in the land from them, that the Jews alone have legal and historical right to the land, and that anyone who supports the Palestinian cause is supporting Nazi-style demonization of the Jews, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And that applies to every Western liberal.
Well, today I have the privilege of being with actually a relative. You're kind of a cousin-in-law, I guess, if that's the right term. I don't know.
That's right.
Right, Mateen? Mateen Elass.
Right.
He is a great guy, PhD, great story, born and raised in Saudi Arabia, migrated to India to seek truth with some gurus, landed at Stanford. You were I believe, undergrad was philosophy, correct? Undergrad?
That's correct. Psychology and philosophy, two majors.
Okay. And then all of a sudden, somehow you came to a conversion to Christianity, and then you ended up in London. I think you went to Oxford, right, for your PhD in New Testament studies?
Well, I graduated from Stanford and then went to seminary down in Pasadena, Fuller Seminary, got a master's in theology and then a Master of Divinity degree, and then served as a pastor for a number of years. And then we went overseas for PhD work in New Testament. And I went to the University of Durham up in...
Oh, we're in Durham. I'm sorry. Okay. Oops. Okay.
Oxford is a good place.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, because we had done an interview previously, but unfortunately it's lost in space somewhere since the channel lost all the videos. But how can somebody grown into a Muslim environment end up at Stanford and then get an MDiv, get a PhD in New Testament study? How did the Lord get a hold of you? If you have a short version of that for our listeners. Sure.
Well, of course, it's all a matter of grace, because in my own life I was headed away from God. Mm-hmm. I thought I was hunting for God, but I was hunting for false gods, actually. And it took a dramatic turn because of the Christian community, Christians who befriended me and who introduced me to the Bible and got me reading the Gospels, that really led to my coming to Christ. I'd been studying, as you mentioned, I grew up in a Muslim world. My father was Muslim, born and raised in Syria, but we grew up in Saudi Arabia. He was working for Aramco Oil Company, and so we were in the center of a Sunni Muslim, very conservative world, and that actually led me away from Islam as I saw how Islam was being practiced in Saudi Arabia, and I ended up moving. I couldn't in my family situation go and start studying the New Testament or the Bible on my own. I would not have been permitted,
Sure.
but I went towards Eastern religion and ended up practicing.
So, excuse me for a second if I interject. So, Eastern religion is more accepted than Christianity?
Yeah, it's wild, but the prohibition against Christianity and Judaism is much stronger in the Middle East because they're proximate religions. They're
Sure.
They're being practiced nearby, and so
Sure.
Muslims tend to have much stronger reaction against Islam, against Christianity and Judaism. They don't know much about the Eastern religions, about classical yoga for sure, and about
Sure.
Hinduism and Buddhism. In reality, they should be much more opposed to Hinduism and Buddhism, or Hinduism at least, because Hinduism is the seat of polytheism. You've
Sure.
got some 300,000 gods and goddesses in Hinduism.
Sure. Sure.
But most Muslims don't know much about it. It seems very distant. So
It's
they're
not
more
a
concerned
threat to
about-
them when they got Israel right
Exactly.
there. And yeah, sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So, and my dad was pretty relaxed about religious practices in general until at age 20, after reading the Gospels and becoming so overwhelmed by the person of Jesus. I thought, even in all my studies, I was, as you mentioned, philosophy major at Stanford, and I'd studied Eastern philosophy from age 14 on till age 20 when I met Christ. I'd learned a lot about other religious leaders and thinkers, and Jesus from the New Testament just loomed head and shoulders above anybody else. So I gave my life to Christ in September of 1975. I went home that Christmas for Christmas break. I was a junior at Stanford University at the time. And I'd always shared with my father about my religious practices or pursuits. And he'd been very encouraging when I was practicing classical yoga and all. So I told him I'd become a Christian, and that was not permissible. He just exploded and told me I couldn't do that. I had to recant my faith in Christ. I was stabbing him and our family in the back.
Family.
I was
Yeah.
putting our relatives in the Middle East in danger
risk.
if it became known, and I myself could face arrest and beheading in Saudi Arabia for leaving Islam to become a Christian. So it was a very complicated and difficult, painful time. And in the end, he kicked me out of the family that lasted for about 15 years before finally he relented and allowed me and by that time my wife and our 3 kids back into the family.
That's great. So there was reconciliation before he passed,
There was
right?
reconciliation in terms of the family relationship. He still couldn't really deal with the fact that I was a Christian first and then a pastor second. But when I got my PhD in New Testament studies in 1996, that was in his mind a good thing. He could think about me with pride because he could say, "Well, my son has a degree," and he hoped that I would go into academic studies or teaching at that point and not be a pastor, because that was something that stuck in his craw. He couldn't really handle my being a pastor.
Wow. So I wanted to touch upon a couple of things. You have a new book out. It's called, The Fairy Tale Islam. So it's a pretty bold title. if you want to draw attention from Islamist terrorists, write a book like that and advertise it. So first of all, I mean, it takes, some guts to do that. And then he goes on to say, the deception, right? So what prompted you to write that book in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. I actually have a copy here, and the subtitle really gives an idea of what the book is about: Deceptions Masking a Dark Reality.
Yeah.
And so what prompted me to write the book is I speak a lot on the subject of Islam, and I talk to both Christian groups and secular groups about the challenges or dangers that Islam poses either to the West or to the mission of the church, the gospel message. And as I've spoken, I don't know how many hundreds of times to different groups and have Q&A time afterwards, inevitably, there are certain groups of questions that rise up. Well, isn't Islam a religion of peace? Didn't Muhammad have a positive effect on the role or place of women in pagan Arabia? Isn't the God of the Quran, the God of the Bible, one and the same? Mm-hmm. Don't Muslims think really highly of Jesus? He's one of the most revered prophets in Islam, and so on. So I started to catalog those questions, and I noticed that the version of Islam that is projected or promoted in Western media, as well as by Islamic apologists, is a version of Islam that does not have any sort of roots in Orthodox Islam. And that's why I called it fairy tale Islam. So I took these questions.
So let me interject, from time to time, if there is something that comes to mind. So are you saying that they're just showing a portion of Islam, or you're saying that is all new construct in the first place?
They're showing a highly sanitized version of what true Islam is. Okay. So you get this, just to take one example, Islam is a religion of peace. Well,
by the way, I check on Amazon. You can get his book on Amazon. I check on Amazon, and there was one negative comment that I saw. This one gal, I guess, that said, "Oh, Islam is a religion of peace," and I'm going, "Oh, I don't know what Islam is she talking about," but that's a common. It's a common comment. I mean, a lot of people that do not know enough about it regurgitate what they've been hearing either through the media or friends or whatever. So. Talk about that specifically, yeah.
Yeah, and people who say that typically know very little about Islam, and they confuse two things. They confuse nice Muslim people that they know with the Islam that they assume those people are practicing. But typically there's a huge disconnect between kind, westernized Muslims and Orthodox Islam. But people don't realize that. They just think, oh, well, the Muslims I know are really nice people. So Islam can't be a religion that is so harsh and that has so much evil in it.
Wow. Wow. You know what, Mateen, sorry again, I'm interrupting here, but what struck me by you saying this is that it's a higher calling for us as believer to behave differently. Because if you actually go and do a Google search, I remember I did this years ago because I couldn't believe it. Somebody told me, might have been my wife actually, might have been Jane, that told me, if you go and search, why are Christians so, and you don't finish the phrase, what they said was critical, hypocritical, hateful, I mean, all derogatory terms. And I thought, whoa. So if that's the way we are perceived, we are terrible ambassador. And you're saying exactly the reverse. Here you have nice Muslim people that their character is projecting something, but the true identity technically is different. I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Yeah, that's a sad comment on the church.
Yeah,
for sure. So this comment, Islam is a religion of peace. There are many Muslims who believe that, because the version of Islam that they know is one that is not anchored in the Quran. There's no way, if you actually read the Quran, that you could say Islam is a religion of peace, except in this one way. Muslims divide the world, as every religion does. Muslims divide the world into two groups, but they name the two groups. The group that's all the Muslims is known as Dar al-Islam or Dar al-Salam, which means the house of peace. Actually, the word Dar, the Arabic word Dar, means encampment. So it's military terminology. So you're in the encampment of peace or the encampment of Islam on the one hand. And so you are at peace, because if you're in Islam, the saying goes, you are God is pleased with you. You're at peace with God and with the fellow Muslims.
Yeah.
Now, the other camp is known as Dar al-Harb, and the word harb in Arabic means war.
War.
So you're in the house of war because
Right.
you're an unbeliever.
You're
And
the infidel.
Islam, yeah, you're the infidel. And the mandate in Islam is that camp of warfare has to be defeated. So the camp of peace, the camp of Islam, is always at odds with the camp of war. And the goal is to conquer those who are in the encampment of war and either kill them or incapacitate them or bring them into Islam, one of those three possibilities. So a Muslim can say, yeah, Islam is a religion of peace, because they're thinking, if you're in Islam, you're at peace with God. They don't mention that, well, if you're outside of Islam, there's no peace for you. You are enemies to us, and we're at war with you.
We're coming after you.
You submit. Yeah. So that's one way in which you have this fairy tale Islam, this version of Islam that says everything is roses and unicorns. Come to Islam and you'll have a wonderful life.
Because I believe that kids are even taught when they're very young to hate Israel, to hate America. They got the little devil, the big devil, right?
Yeah.
And
the little Satan and the great Satan.
That's right.
And it's not just hate Israel, but it's hate all Jews, because the Quran doesn't speak of Israel very much. It doesn't speak of modern day Israel, but it doesn't even speak so much about the people of the Israelites. It speaks of Jews, and the language that's used of Jews in the Quran is very, very harsh. And
pigs.
The portrayal of Jews is a caricature. The Jews are the worst of human beings, the vilest of creatures. Of course, that's true of Christians as well, according to the Quran. But the Jews are inveterate liars. They're always just interested in money and in power and control. And so the picture of Jews that is promoted from the pulpits of the mosques around the world is that the Jews are behind all of the evil of the world. If something's gone wrong, somehow the Jews are behind it. So the Muslim world looks at the Jews and says it's a conspiracy, that the Jews are controlling everything. They control the media, they control the news organizations, they control governments. You hear this throughout the Muslim world. And so the message of the Muslim leadership to the rest of the Islamic world is, don't trust the Jews, don't befriend Jews. Ultimately, our goal is to take the Jews out. There's a very famous hadith. It's actually quoted in the Hamas organizing charter that says, in the last days, before the end comes, it'll be the Muslims' responsibility to go to war against the Jews everywhere. And in that time period, when this war takes place, as Muslims are killing Jews, the trees and the rocks will cry out to the believer, saying, "Oh, Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come here and kill him."
Wow.
So that's the Muslim picture of what's going to be in the end time. That is up to the Muslim community worldwide to hunt down Jews and kill them.
To eradicate evil. Which, I don't want to get political here, because we can even talk about, the Gaza conflict. And from what I've seen, and that's the danger. See, you have infiltration now into the U.S. at the university level. so that you're creating, national terrorism here. We are actually bringing that in because people have been brainwashed.
Yeah.
Those are all, agents in my mind that came in into the different university just to incite demonstration and whatnot. And sometimes I've seen, I don't know, probably you've seen it too, you see interviews with some of the students, they don't even know what they're protesting. They have zero clue.
Or they,
what are we doing
carry
here? What is this?
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free!
I wish I was more educated. I'm not either.
Oh.
I came from Columbia. I was there up at Columbia and we came down. They said NYU students needed our support. So I came down. I heard there's lots of cops. Some people were saying it was getting dangerous.
Yeah, they carry these placards that say "From the river to the sea,
Exactly.
Palestine will be free." And you ask them, "Well, which river are you talking
Which
about?
river?
Which sea?"
From the Jordan to the Mediterranean. That's what we're looking at. You're looking at that stretch of the West Bank and Gaza and the whole.
Right.
But
They say, "Well, the river, maybe it's the Nile River, and the sea, well, the Atlantic Ocean, maybe."
yeah.
It's crazy.
But it is concerning because again with the homegrown terrorism, all of a sudden you're creating another level, that is not as easily identifiable, right? How do you fight that? And what is that threat? I mean, long haul. Maybe I'm jumping the gun here because we haven't talked too much about the historicity or the beginning of Islam. But what if we are the infidel, in essence, we are the one that are making this earth dirty, right? So if you want cleansing, those are the righteous ones that need to eradicate anything else but Islam, right? But eventually, isn't really Sharia law the final goal? Because under Sharia, you have all the rights to eliminate everybody without any repercussions.
Yeah, Sharia, of course, is from a Muslim point of view, it's divine law. It's been distilled from the Quran and all of the religious authoritative sources of Islam, so that by 250 years or so after the death of Muhammad, the Muslim scholars go through all this material and they say, these are the laws that God has revealed through Muhammad over the centuries of both the Quran and then what are known as the Hadith traditions and the Sirah, the earliest biographies of Muhammad. So we've distilled it and we've come up with these laws. And these now are, we recognize them as the laws that God has given for a perfect society. And so the goal of Islam is not just to conquer the world and make all human beings submit to Islam, but it's also then to live under a society that is regulated by Sharia, by Islamic law.
Now, you mentioned, you just said perfect society, and yet if you talk to some that have experienced a change like you have, there is quite a contrast. They say, no, absolutely, that wasn't a perfect society. That was total dictatorship. You couldn't think, you couldn't move, you couldn't do. So is that the utopia that you're looking for? Is the way you can express your desire, your thought? I was listening to one video a while back, I think it's called Dear Infidels, that PragerU put out, Prager University.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And was talking about that thread, and there was this woman that was a Muslim gal that moved to Israel, and she said, well, there is 20% Palestinian population that lives in Israel, and we have all the same rights of the Israelites. They treat us nicely.
Israelis.
We have access to, we have access to education, we have access to the medical treatment, we have access to all these things, unlike what they told us that we'll be encountering. We'll be encountering, suppression and this and that. So again, they're building this monster that doesn't exist, and they tout themselves as the perfect society. It's like...
Yeah. And then when you ask the question about migration, so many people leaving Muslim majority countries, fleeing to the West because they know that there's a better life available in the West. But if you have the perfect society, a
Why
perfect
would you
law,
leave?
why would you ever leave? Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and when you look at the metrics that are used to measure countries with regard to healthcare and education and human rights and all those kinds of things, the Muslim majority countries rank always in the lowest quartile, 25% and lower in comparison with other nations. The only nations that have broken out of that lowest quartile have been the oil-rich nations, the Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain, because they've got the cash to make life better in a Western kind of style. But if you look at Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh,
so
the standard of living is so low. And then one thing that really has intrigued me, Peppo, is that when you look at the Nobel Prize winners across the board in the different areas, economics, biology, physics, chemistry, peace, mathematics, I looked up the statistics on this from the beginning of the Nobel Prize, sometime in the early 1900s, until 2023. 965 Nobel Prizes have been awarded. Of those, 15 have gone to Arab or Muslim people. And most of those out of the 15, it's been people who were educated in the West and have done their research in the West. Then and the Arab Muslim population totals about 28% of the world's population. So 15 out of 965.
Wow.
Then you ask how many Nobel Prizes have been won by Jews, who constitute 0.2% of the world's population. And the total numbers of Nobel Prizes won by Jews is, I can't remember the exact number, 220 some, I think.
Wow.
It's
almost
in any case.
Fourth. Yeah.
So it's 22% of the world's, of the world's, of the Nobel Prizes won, have been won by Jews. And you ask the question, why are the Jewish people and Westernized people so good at breakthroughs in science and in peace and mathematics and so on? And why are the Muslim people so bad at it? And the answer is that the Muslim world, because of Islam, is always focused backwards. Well, they want to do that, but they're also looking backwards at the 7th century. They're saying the best of Islam is what was revealed in the time of the Prophet. And our goal as Muslims is to try to recreate the culture of 7th century Arabia, because that was the best time to live, because that's when Muhammad came into the world, and Muhammad is the best of all examples of what a good human being should be like.
Can we stop on that for a second? Because probably some people don't even know about Muhammad's life. I mean, there are some pretty wicked things. If you want to go back to that kind of an example, let's talk about what kind of a person was he?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. In the book, I say that Islam really is built on 2 pillars. And if those 2 pillars are unstable, then Islam crumbles, or it should crumble. The first pillar is Muhammad, both his life as a human being and his life as a so-called prophet. And then the second pillar is the Quran itself, because Muslims believe that the Quran is the perfect revelation of God. It's God's literal words given by God to the angel Gabriel, who recited them perfectly to Muhammad, who memorized them perfectly, who then Muhammad then recited them to his followers, and they wrote down everything perfectly. And so Muslims believe that the Quran is the perfect words of God, preserved from the beginning of time, that was communicated then to Muhammad and to the whole world. So if you can show that the Quran is not the perfect words of God, if there are errors in the Quran, if there are stories in the Quran that don't make sense, if there are claims in the Quran that Muslims often regard as scientific claims that Muhammad could not have had knowledge about, that prove the Quran is true. But like this story, that meteorites or shooting stars are what they really are is God taking a star in his hand when a jinn or an evil spirit has gotten too close to heaven and is trying to listen in on the conversations of heaven. God takes a star and he throws it at the jinn to disperse the jinn, and that's what we see as a shooting star. That's the scientific explanation for what shooting stars are. But, I mean, that's just one of a number of things. But anyway, to get back to Muhammad as a person, to be honest, you have to say that there were some good qualities in Muhammad as a human being. Otherwise, who would follow him?
Yeah.
But having said that, there are so many bad things about Muhammad, about his conduct and his teachings, that it's a disaster that almost a quarter of the world's population sees him as the example that you should follow, that God wants you to follow.
Well, you mentioned there are some good qualities. Which one are, just mention a few of the good ones,
okay,
to kind of balance the thing.
Yeah, Muhammad, according to this, all of this, of course, is according to Islamic tradition, because we don't have any independent reports outside of the early Muslim world about who Muhammad was. And actually, this might get things really off track, but there are scholars today who wonder whether Muhammad actually ever existed as a real person, or whether he was a construct later of this religion to give justification. But setting that aside, the Muslim traditions say that Muhammad was a generous man. He was known even before he launched his career as a prophet. According to Islam, he was 40 years old at that point, and that was 610 AD. So even before that time, he had a nickname, El Amin, which means the faithful one. And so,
faithful to who?
Faithful in terms of his ability to be true to friends. Okay. To be a person who was trustworthy. I guess that's the way to say it. So those are some of the good things about Muhammad. He started out he had a hard early life. His dad died before he was born. While obviously when his mother was carrying him in the womb. And then at age 6, his mother passed away. And so he was given to the charge of his grandfather. His grandfather died after a few years beyond that. So he came under the charge of his father, one of his father's brothers. So he then was raised as a member of that family, but sort of not as an outcast, but as someone who didn't rightly belong within that little family structure. He went to work for a rich widow when he was in his early 20s. She owned a number of caravan trading groups, and she hired him, according to Islamic tradition, to go on one of these caravans up to Syria, and it was successful when it came back, and he was highly regarded for his business acumen, and she ended up proposing to him. She was 40, he was 25. They got married, and he remained, according to Islamic tradition, faithful to her in that single marriage until she passed away in 619. So they were married for about 30 some years. But when she died, that's when the multiple marriages started.
Yeah, but didn't he have to offset it? I guess he was, 20 some odd years senior, so he's going with a 9-year-old.
Yeah, that's the problematic thing. He married the second woman or person that he married after his first wife, Khadija, died, was the daughter of his favorite friend, lieutenant, a guy named Abu Bakr. And he became engaged to her, betrothed to her when she was 6 years old.
6. I thought it was 9. Okay, that's even worse.
He became betrothed to her when she was 6. Aisha is her name. And he married her when she was 9.
Mm.
And of course, this is 9 according to the lunar calendar, which is shorter
Shorter.
than
Yeah.
the solar
28-day
calendar.
cycle. Yeah. Yeah.
So 9 years old, and so he took her to his bed at that point, made her a woman, so to speak, this little 9-year-old girl. And part of the tragedy of this whole thing, Peppo, is that, as I mentioned, according to Islam, Muhammad is the best example of what it means to be a human being. And so every Muslim who is serious about practicing Islam is supposed to try to model himself or herself as much as possible after the life of Muhammad. And that's a big reason why you find, Muhammad, at the time he married Aisha, he was 53 or 54.
Wow.
And so many Muslim men think this is the ultimate goal, to find a young girl, 9 years old, prepubescent, and marry her. And Allah will be pleased with me because I'm emulating the perfect prophet that he sent into the world. And the Quran makes it clear that the Muslim men were marrying girls who were prepubescent as they were in the time of Muhammad, following after his example, because the Quran gives guidance on if you divorce a woman, what you have to do to divorce her. And so it says for women who are past childbearing age, well, you don't have to worry about them getting pregnant. So you don't have to wait 3 months to make sure that they're not going to be pregnant, and then you'd have responsibility for that infant. But for women who still are capable of childbearing, if you want to divorce the woman, you have to you make the decision to divorce her, but then you have to wait 3 months to make sure that she's not pregnant. And then the divorce can be finalized. And then it says, for those who have not yet begun menstruating, you still have to wait 3 months. So the Quran itself makes evident that there are Muslim men who are marrying prepubescent girls, all because Muhammad did it. And so if whatever Muhammad did is justified within Islam, and Muslims seek to follow that. So Muhammad also, for instance, had slaves, male and female slaves. He bought slaves, he was gifted slaves, he sold slaves, and he gifted slaves to other people, and he set some slaves free at times. So Muslims think, well, even though modern day society and international law prohibits slavery, it can't be wrong because Muhammad has slaves. And so even though we can't legally have slaves, we can still do it sort of under the radar. So in the Gulf countries, for instance, where you have a lot of very wealthy Arabs, they will bring over from the Philippines or from Pakistan or somewhere,
Bangladesh,
these house servants, and they're promised that you work for us, you work in an 8-hour day, and we'll pay you, and you'll have a 2-year contract. Well, when they get there, what they discover is
they take their passports.
Take the passport. They have no recourse. They don't work an 8-hour day. They work until the owner says, okay, you can now go to sleep. And they don't get vacation time. They don't get to go back home. So they're practically speaking slaves. And the Muslim person thinks, oh, this is okay because Muhammad did it, and we want to emulate Muhammad. Same thing with sex slaves. We don't see that at large in the Muslim world, by and large, but we do see it in the groups that are trying as hard as possible to practice the Islam of Muhammad. So ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, all of these groups that we label terrorist groups, they see themselves as pure Muslims. And so, for instance, ISIS, when they conquered territory in Syria and Iraq, they took young Yazidi girls and Shiite women or young Shiite girls in Syria. They captured them and they made them into sex slaves because Muhammad said that was permissible. the Quran has this phrase that you can have legal sex, of course, with your wife or wives. As a Muslim man, you can have up to 4 wives at any one time. Although Muhammad wasn't restricted by that, he had about 11, I think, when he finally passed away. But you can have sex legally with your wives, and then with, this is the phrase in the Quran, those whom your right hand possesses.
So basically, the slaves that you have welcomed to your farm.
Those you have captured as war booty. You've killed the husband, or you've made them slaves. You sold them on the market, but you've kept the women and the girls because you can make them into sex slaves if they're attractive to you. And Muhammad said, "Yeah, that's perfectly fine."
Okay, so how in the world, we just got back from Italy. We're in Italy for 6 months, and it blew me away to see how many, well, in certain areas, how the Muslim population is just rampant. And you can think, okay, well, those are immigrants coming in. What blew me away is to see Italian going that route, wearing the burqa and so on. And I'm thinking, how can you, in your right mind, if you're investigating, before you're making a choice, if you're investigating what's behind it, how can you endorse what you just shared? Tell me. I mean, how can you be duped so heavily into something like this?
Well, I'd like to say that it happens only to weak-minded people, but that's not always the case. The reality is that most human beings do not do a lot of research before they make a decision about a religion, any religion. They're attracted because typically they're attracted to the individuals they see, or the lifestyle that they see among the individuals that they're interested in or moved by. With regard to Islam, as we mentioned early on in this interview, that a lot of Muslims give a good image. They portray themselves in public in a certain way, but once you get behind the veil or behind the door, and you see the way that they're really living, the way they're really practicing things, it's a rude awakening. But by the time you've committed to become a Muslim, if you, as they say, you take the Shahada, you declare in Arabic, there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. You're now on the inside, and once you're on the inside, there are all sorts of restrictions on your life, sort of like that the Eagles song Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. So the apostasy laws in Islam, if you've declared that now you're a Muslim, and then you say, well, I want to leave, Islam says, if you try to leave, we will kill you.
Death penalty. And they're serious about it, because I had a conversation with this one taxi driver one time. I was speaking at this conference in Chicago, and he took me to the airport, and we started engaging. Muslim guy. His son was at university, so I asked him a question. I said, "What would you do if your son comes back during the holiday and tells you that he is a born-again Christian?" He goes, "I kill him." And I said, "No, come on, I'm serious. What would you do?" He said, "No, I am serious. I will kill him."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, what? Your own son? Over a belief? You kill him?" So yes, unbelievable. So the mindset is just Whoa.
So fortunately, I faced that kind of decision from my father, but he was not a hard-nosed practicing Muslim. He was pretty much by that point a cultural Muslim. But even so, he would never have brought himself to try to kill me, but he did the next best thing he could, which was to blackball
you out of the family.
But this is a practice within the Islamic world that's known as honor killing. That is, if you as an individual, as a member of the family, shame the family by leaving Islam and becoming a Christian or an atheist even, that the family says our honor has been taken from us, besmirched by you, and the community that we're a part of is so embarrassed and hurt by this decision that we are demanding that you return to Islam. You repent and return to Islam. If you fail to do that, then we will kill you. we'll take your life in order to restore our honor. And honor killings around the world aren't limited to Islam.
I know,
But
I'm thinking, when I was just speaking, I'm thinking of the Sicilian in Italy. They had honor killing. If your wife went with somebody else and you killed that man, that was honorable.
Yeah.
If you didn't, you would be a schmuck. So
well, that's a Yiddish word, but it would be
yeah. Yeah.
But out of all the honor killings in the world, the last statistics that had been gathered, I think we're about 10 years old now, but they said that 91% of the honor killings are done by Muslims to family members, or by Muslims in the community. You know, if the family doesn't take action, the larger Muslim community will take action, because it's a stain on the honor of Islam for a Muslim to apostatize.
So what about forgiveness in all of this? I mean, what is the what is the grace of the forgiveness? Where you're saying, you know what, I'm opting to value human life over a decision, good or bad that it is, that my son or my daughter made. So I'm going to let him live.
Yeah, human life is not valued above Islam. So there is, in Islam, there are no natural human rights that accrue to all human beings, regardless of whether they're Muslims or not. The only human rights that you can't even talk about human rights. You can talk about grants that are bestowed upon human beings by Allah because they're Muslim. But if you're not a Muslim, you don't have those grants. You are considered someone that is to be either killed and sent to Allah for final judgment in the fires of hell, or you're to be subjected by the Muslim community to serve them as slaves. So the Muslims believe, because the Quran says in Surah chapter 3 that the Muslims are the best of all peoples that God has given to the world to enjoin virtue and to suppress vice. So Muslims see themselves as superior to the non-Muslim world, and they believe that the non-Muslim world is meant to serve them and to empower them, or to provide welfare for the Muslims. That's why you find so many Muslims who leave their Muslim country and they come to Europe or to the US, and they want to live off the dole. They believe that the
They're
West,
entitled.
that the non-Muslim world owes them their living. And they see it as their right, but they also see it as a way to weaken the Western countries by taking the resources as much as they can, not working, and saying, you support me and my family, because
that's very interesting. That's very interesting, because in Italy is a big issue. You know, we have all these Muslims coming in, and they are impacting the healthcare system. Because they're not really paying much into it, but they're draining the heck out of it. So we kind of brought it upon ourselves. I mean, we're the stupid ones. You know, we're not opening up our eyes. You know, what are you doing? You know, you're inviting a Trojan horse into your own house.
Absolutely. And it's not just, of course, it's not just Italy. France is facing the same thing.
UK.
The UK. I just read a story this morning about Sweden, and a Iraqi Muslim who'd been there for 10 years, has never had a job, has just, in Sweden, they give you free housing, free food subsidies, free healthcare and everything. And he's lived, the average of $50,000 a year that he's been given by the government. He refused to work. Finally, the immigration people said to him, you have to get a job. So they set him up with a job in a nursing home. He sexually abused one elderly lady. He was caught for that, but he was allowed to go back and work there again with a stern warning: don't do this again. he just was picked up in this last week for having the allegation of having raped 2 other elderly women in that nursing home. What's Sweden going to do with him? Well, they said, well, we're going to prosecute him, but they won't. They may prosecute him, but he'll get off with a light penalty. He'll go back on the dole, get money from the government to live there again. They won't ship him back off to Iraq because they say, well, he might get killed in Iraq because he's
poor boy.
He's
Yeah.
welcome back there. So they are allowing this kind of behavior to continue. So you ask, well, who's the stupid person in that situation? Well, it's the Swedish government.
Of course. So then
so-
replace that with the U.S. because we've done the same thing. We opened up the borders. Anybody and everybody has come in. You know, they haven't been vetted. We know that there are, I forget, 120,000 terrorists that have been identified. And why? Just for the sake of a vote? Why are we doing this? I wouldn't invite a rapist into my house with my 2 little girls, if I had 2 little girls, and say, yeah, spend the night, you know, because I want to show you hospitality. Wait a minute. Hey, here's your hotel, you know, go there. I talk to you tomorrow, but not in my house.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this?
I think the best thing you can say is that the American leadership has allowed this to happen is hopelessly naive. They think that we will win the affection of the world by inviting all of these people into our country and helping them get a new start and all. That's the best case scenario that they're.
Yeah, but don't you think? I mean, you've seen the example of the gal, there's a congresswoman in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, right?
Yeah, Ilhan Omar. Yeah.
She is vocal against America. So not only you're here as a guest, we're so stupid to elevate you to that level, but you have the balls or even criticizing the hand that fed you. So isn't that enough of an example to say enough is enough?
Yeah. So I was talking about the best case scenario, those who are naive. The worst case scenario is those who are in leadership who are saying, we actively are trying to undermine the United States as a Western democracy. We want to bring down the U.S. government and replace it with something else. And I think Ilhan Omar is along those lines. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
Sure.
Rashida Tlaib up in Michigan, Andrew Carson, who's got a Western name, but he's a Muslim representative, House representative as well. They've got a vision of a radical, well, for some of them, radical socialist / communist country that they would like to see replace the U.S. democracy. And those who are Muslim have also an agenda. They want to see the U.S. democracy replaced with a Sharia compliant government. So both the very radical left political world and the very conservative radical Muslim world are partnering together to this degree that they want to see the U.S. democracy taken down. They have a different vision about what they want to replace it. And I think they're thinking, okay, we'll fight that out after we destroy America.
The big
from
Satan.
within.
Let's destroy the big Satan and then we'll rebuild, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually encouraged by what Trump has done in his trip over in the Middle East. I mean, he came back with what, $3.1 trillion worth of new business between Syria and Saudi Arabia. And he was, in some of the streets, he was also acclaimed as a hero. Have you seen? I saw a couple of little snippets here and there because I was too busy this weekend. But I thought that's an interesting point of view. I mean, if the Satan, because he's the representative of the big Satan, strikes a deal with the Muslim, how is that possible? Does that money speaks even louder than belief?
That is a great question. There are a couple answers to this, I think. One is that the the leadership in the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, their God is really the dollar. It's not Allah. But they have to play the game because the religious leadership in their countries is very, very dedicated to Islam, and of course they believe that the U.S. is under the grip of Satan. They think the U.S. is pumping out all of this evil into the world, and of course it's not living under Sharia government, so it can't be a good government. And of course is supporting, giving the underneath resources that Israel needs to survive, and that's why Israel is the little Satan and America is the big Satan, because America is the big power that is standing against Allah in this world. So the religious leadership thinks we can't trust America, but the political leadership is saying, hey, we can use America for our own strengthening as countries. We can do business deals with them that will benefit America and benefit us as well. So let's ride the coattails as long as we can. But all Muslims who know anything about the history of Islam and Muhammad's dealings with non-Muslims knows that Muhammad said you can enter into treaties with non-Muslims when you need the treaty. If you're not strong enough to conquer them, you can enter a treaty with them. And so he did that before he conquered Mecca. He entered a treaty with the people of Mecca, who were pagans at the time, his tribe. And the treaty is known as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. It was a 10-year treaty. But within 2 years, Muhammad had enough soldiers that he was able to march on Mecca with 10,000 troops, and the people of Mecca were not prepared. And they said, well, we have a treaty. And he said, well, the treaty was good for 2 years, but the next 8 years, we don't need that treaty, so we're abrogating the treaty. So the Muslim world says, okay, you can enter into a treaty or an alliance with a non-Muslim power as long as it's in your interest, until it's no longer in your interest, and then you can defy that treaty and do what you want. So I have no illusions that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the other countries and Syria, even worse, that somehow that this will be a happy alliance that lasts hundreds of years. It'll be an alliance that benefits those countries and benefits the U.S. in the short term. But once those countries say we don't need an alliance with the U.S. any longer, they'll be quick to kick them to the curb.
Rescind that agreement. Yeah. So, what would you say in conclusion? What would you say to the listener in terms of potential threats? I mean, what are the potential threats? We touched upon it, as we were discussing this thing, but do you foresee potentially a Muslim U.S. government? I mean, i.e. Sharia law taking over? Is that a possibility? I know that I heard some people in the past saying, if the Muslim population in any particular town grows over 10%, you get to the point of no return. Because just by virtue of birth, they're going to take over. And that's the problem in Italy. We have 1.3 birth by Italian. We need 2.1 to maintain the ethnicity. The only thing that keeps us going is the immigrants coming in. But that's not Italian ethnicity anymore. So
and the population rate among Muslim families is something like 4.3 or higher. I've heard different numbers. So they are outbirthing the native population. And the 10% is typically the benchmark, saying once this Muslim population reaches that, what's it called? The power, you can think of the right word. I can't think of it.
Yeah,
the
well, it's a
momentum.
point of no return, basically, because
Yeah.
mathematically you cannot stop it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's not a point of no return, but the momentum is such that if
Yeah.
radical action is not taken to reverse things, then the natural momentum is going to take you to a Muslim nation. And France is facing that. France is right around 10% Muslim population now. England is fast approaching that. And so that's, that is the benchmark where things get really bad. When you reach that 10%, you have now conflict, outright conflict between the Muslim population and the native population, and that Europe is seeing that. I mean, it seems to me that the government in the UK has sort of given in. They're not saying, okay, we're a Muslim country now, but they're saying, okay, this is inevitable, and we don't want to face the pain that it would take to try to reverse things. So they give in every time Muslims push for a little bit more. The government gives in a little bit more. But I think there will be some kind of civil war at least in many countries within Europe, as the Muslim population continues to grow and to demand more, and as the native European population says, "Hey, we're losing our identity culturally, and we're losing our human rights to this encroaching Sharia." And there'll be, I think, many people who have enjoyed living in the freedoms of Europe who say, I'm not going to give in to this as if Islamic encroachment is just a natural thing. I'm going to fight back. But I think even more that will happen in the U.S.
Even more in the U.S.?
I think the U.S. will fight back, and
Okay.
of course we've got the Second Amendment, we've got the right to bear arms, and I think if things get to that point, I hope they never do, but if they get to the point where it's a choice, you either comply with Sharia or you resist, that there'll be many Americans who take out their weapons and say, I'm resisting.
Yeah. But it's still scary to see how many people have been protesting, pro-Hamas in U.S. soil, not knowing really what's going on, not knowing the history.
Yeah, that's what we call the useful idiots, the way they had communist sympathizers who had no idea what communism was about. But they said, out with...
Send them to Cuba, send them to Venezuela, send them to some of these places.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. You know it, Peppo. Most Americans have lived such an insular life. They've never been to other countries. They don't know what life, how poor life can be in other countries. And they just think, oh, we've got so many problems here. If we just became a little bit more like Pakistan, we'd be a great nation. They've never been to Pakistan to see what life is like there.
And too much idle time, too much wealth, too much idle time, and
too privileged.
Absolutely. So your book is on Amazon. Where else they can find it? People that want to find
Amazon. Amazon is the principal location to go.
All right.
And I think it's of the four books I've written, it's to me the most important, because it's one that's, I'm not the only one doing this, but it's one that's sounding the alarm that we've got to get serious about our understanding of what Islam actually brings to the West.
So in the book, I guess the back of the book, people will have a way of getting in touch with you if they want to ask you a question, or
I think so. But if not,
how somebody wants to get a hold of you right now, even watching the video, how do they get a hold of you?
They just use my name, Mateen Elass, as one word, at gmail.com. That's my email address, and I'm glad to interact with anybody who'd like to talk.
Thank you so much. Very informative, and I hope that people will wake up before it's too late. Seriously, especially for the generation to come. We owe them to the generation to come. We owe them that freedom. So.
Yeah, no question, Peppo. Thank you so much for having me on. I hope we can chat again at some point.
We will. All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
God bless you. Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.